Every man carries a burden he'll never speak about out loud. And today, we're uncovering what Freud discovered about this hidden truth. Picture this scenario: a successful gentleman who appears to have everything figured out, yet every night before sleep, he stares at his reflection and experiences an unexplainable emptiness that haunts his core. According to Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, beneath every masculine behavior lies an unconscious conflict so profound that men choose to ignore it rather than confront it head-on. This secret has nothing to do with career achievements, financial status, or external accomplishments. It touches something far more intimate and universal, something that strikes at the very heart of masculine identity itself. Today, you'll discover 6 hidden indicators that expose this unspoken secret. Each indicator will open your eyes to dynamics you've probably witnessed countless times but never truly understood. If you want to keep exploring the mysteries of human behavior and discover what hides behind the masks we wear daily, make sure to subscribe to the channel. The first indicator begins with a fear that every man carries deep within himself. The initial sign that betrays a man's most concealed secret is his obsessive need to constantly prove his competence, even in the most trivial situations. Picture this scene. You're at dinner with a group of friends, and someone mentions they fixed an appliance by themselves. Instantly, one of the men present starts telling about when he repaired something even more complex, adding technical details nobody requested. This isn't simple competition, it's something much deeper. According to Freud, this behavior stems from what he termed the castration complex, not in a literal sense, but as a symbol of the primal fear of being perceived as incomplete, inadequate, or less of a man. The masculine unconscious is tormented by the terror of being discovered as a fraud, of not measuring up to the expectations society has built around the image of the strong and capable man. This defense mechanism manifests through projection. The man projects his own insecurity onto others, transforming it into a compulsive need to excel. Every small situation becomes a test to pass, every conversation a challenge to win. It's as if the unconscious whispers continuously, "You must prove you're enough or you'll be exposed." The tragedy is that this behavior, instead of hiding insecurity, clearly reveals it to those who know how to observe. The more a man strives to appear competent in every area, the more he betrays his deep fear of not truly being so. It's a paradox that Freud understood perfectly. We try to hide precisely what we end up revealing the most. This sign manifests in thousands of different ways, from the man who never asks for directions to the one who must always have the last word in every discussion, from those who never admit to not knowing something to those who turn every hobby into a competition. Behind each of these behaviors lies the same ancestral fear, being judged as inadequate. Do you recognize this pattern in yourself or in the men you know? Next time you witness this dynamic, remember that you're not observing arrogance, but deep vulnerability disguised. But there's a second sign even more revealing, one that touches the most intimate sphere of being a man. The second indicator that unveils the deepest secret of the masculine soul is the unconscious sabotage of emotional intimacy, precisely when it could truly be realized. Imagine this scene. A couple is experiencing a moment of profound emotional connection. She opens up, shares her deepest feelings, and in that moment of mutual vulnerability, he suddenly changes the subject, makes a joke, checks his phone, or finds an excuse to distance himself. It's not cruelty, it's an automatic unconscious mechanism. Freud would explain this behavior through what he called ego annihilation anxiety. True emotional intimacy represents a threat to the masculine unconscious, threatening the identity painstakingly constructed over years. Opening up completely means risking being seen in one's fragility, and this activates a primitive alarm system that screams, "Danger, you're about to lose control." This defense mechanism is called reaction formation. Instead of admitting the fear of intimacy, The man transforms it into its apparent opposite. He becomes the one who doesn't need anyone, who can handle things alone, who considers emotionality as weakness. It's psychological armor that protects but simultaneously imprisons. The deepest tragedy is that this sabotage occurs precisely when the man most desires that connection. It's as if one part of him screams, "Come closer," while another whispers, "Run away." The result is contradictory behavior that confuses both him and his partner. Moments of great intimacy followed by sudden detachment, promises of openness followed by walls of silence. This sign manifests in subtle but recognizable ways. The man who suddenly becomes busy when the relationship deepens, the one who finds flaws in his partner precisely when everything was going well, or who transforms every romantic moment into something practical or sexual, avoiding the purely emotional dimension. Freud understood that behind this fear of intimacy hides the terror of being swallowed by the other, of losing the boundaries of one's own ego. For the masculine unconscious, loving completely means risking disappearing as an individual. It's an archaic fear that has roots in the primordial relationship with the mother, when the child must separate to become autonomous. Have you ever observed this pattern in your relationships or those you know? Next time you see a man distancing himself precisely when intimacy becomes deeper, remember that he's not running from you, but from his own fear of dissolving. But the third sign reveals something even more hidden. The third indicator that reveals the unconfessable secret of the masculine soul is the silent and constant competition with every other man, even in the most innocent and inappropriate situations. Imagine being at a peaceful birthday party among friends. During the evening, you observe how the men present, without realizing it, are constantly measuring themselves. Who tells the most interesting story, who has the better watch, who attracts more female attention, even who ordered the most expensive dish. It's not a declared race, but an underground war fought on 1,000 different fronts. According to Freud, this competition stems from what he defined as unresolved Oedipal complex. Every man carries within himself the echo of that ancient rivalry with his father to win maternal love. Even as an adult, every other male unconsciously reactivates this primitive dynamic. He's a potential rival to defend against or surpass. This mechanism manifests through aggressive sublimation. The competitive instinct is transformed into socially acceptable forms, but remains omnipresent nonetheless. The man cannot help but catalogue every other male in an invisible hierarchical scale, who stands above him and therefore represents a threat, who stands below and can be safely ignored, and who is on the same level and must therefore be constantly monitored. The most tragic part is that this competition is often completely unconscious. The man who boasts about his professional conquests in front of friends isn't simply sharing joy. He's marking territory, establishing his position in the group hierarchy. Those who constantly interrupt others or must always add something to their stories aren't simply rude. They're fighting for conversational dominance. This sign emerges in surprising ways. The father, who unconsciously competes with his teenage son, the man who can't sincerely compliment his friend's successes, the one who turns every group activity into an informal competition. Even in the most collaborative situations, part of the masculine mind is always calculating who is winning. Freud had intuited that this constant competition is actually a defense mechanism against deeper anxiety. The fear of being excluded from the group, of not having a place in the social hierarchy. It's an ancestral fear that goes back to times when being isolated from the pack meant certain death. The paradox is that this competition, which should guarantee group belonging, often ends up isolating. The man always in competition can never truly relax, create authentic connections, or enjoy others' company without constantly calculating his own position. Have you ever noticed this dynamic in the masculine environments you frequent? But the fourth sign touches an even more sensitive chord. The fourth indicator that betrays the most hidden secret of the masculine soul is the obsession with always controlling the narrative of events, especially when things don't go according to plan. Imagine this situation. A man makes an obvious mistake at work, something that has visible consequences recognized by everyone. Instead of simply admitting the error, he automatically begins reconstructing the story. Actually, if you think about it, the real problem was that, or I couldn't predict that, or if others had done their part. He's not necessarily lying consciously. He's activating a psychological survival mechanism. Freud would explain this behavior through what he called secondary narcissism. The adult ego, to protect itself from self-esteem collapse, develops the ability to mentally rewrite reality, transforming every failure into an external circumstance, every error into a misunderstanding, every weakness into a misunderstood demonstration of strength. This defense mechanism manifests through what modern psychologists call self-serving bias, but which Freud had already intuited. The masculine mind is incredibly creative in finding alternative explanations that preserve self-image. It's as if the unconscious says, rather than admit I'm not perfect, I'll rewrite the story. Controlling the narrative thus becomes a sophisticated art. The man who arrives late doesn't say, I overslept, but traffic was impossible. The one who gets dumped by his partner doesn't admit his own relational errors, but explains how she wasn't ready for a serious relationship. Those who fail in a project don't recognize their own responsibilities, but analyze all the external factors that sabotaged success. This tendency also reveals itself in how men tell their own stories. Every anecdote gets unconsciously modified to highlight one's own qualities. They become braver than they actually were, more intelligent than they demonstrated, more desired than they were. It's not simple vanity. It's a self-protection mechanism that operates automatically. The paradox is that this obsessive control of narrative, which should protect self-esteem, often damages it in the long run. Those who can never admit their mistakes cannot learn from them. Those who constantly rewrite reality end up losing contact with it. Those who always tell themselves they're winners never develop the resilience necessary to face real defeats. Freud understood that behind this obsession hides a primordial fear, that of not being lovable for who one really is. It's safer to love an edited version of oneself than risk rejection by showing one's authentic imperfection. Do you recognize this pattern in the stories of the men you know? The fifth sign is perhaps the most painful to confront. The fifth indicator that reveals the deepest secret of the masculine soul is perhaps the most heartbreaking. The secret fear of abandonment that disguises itself as proud emotional independence. Imagine observing a man who constantly repeats, I don't need anyone, I'm fine alone. Relationships are just complications. He seems strong, autonomous, free. But if you observe carefully, you'll notice that this same man obsessively checks phone messages, gets irritated when someone doesn't respond immediately, and tends to push people away before they can do it to him. It's not true independence. It's an emotional survival strategy. According to Freud, this dynamic has roots in what he called primordial abandonment trauma. Every child at some point in their growth experiences the terrifying realization of being able to be left alone. In males, this terror is often repressed so deeply that it transforms into its apparent opposite, the exaltation of solitude. This defense mechanism is called isolation of affect. The painful emotion, fear of being abandoned, is separated from its mental representation, which is then transformed into something positive, love for independence. It's as if the unconscious says, if I abandon first, I can never be abandoned. The tragedy is that this self-protective behavior ends up creating exactly what it fears. The man who distances himself for fear of abandonment pushes away people who could truly love him. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. See, I told you everyone leaves in the end. But they don't leave because they don't love him. They leave because he doesn't allow them to stay. This sign manifests in subtle but devastating ways. The man who sabotages relationships when they become too meaningful. The one who always finds a fatal flaw in his partner precisely when love deepens. Those who transform every gesture of love into a trap to escape from. It's a self-destructive cycle that perpetuates from relationship to relationship. Freud had intuited that behind the facade of the strong and independent man often hides a terrified child who whispers, "Don't leave." But since this whisper is too painful to hear, it gets transformed into the cry, "I don't need you." It's one of the cruelest ironies of the human psyche. The paradox is that the man who most fears abandonment is often the one who appears most detached. Those who proclaim not needing love are often those who most desperately need it. It's a mask so well constructed that it often deceives even the one wearing it. Have you ever seen this pattern in action? Have you ever noticed how displayed independence can hide secret dependence? But the sixth and final sign reveals the heart of the secret no man wants to admit. The sixth and final indicator reveals the secret no man will ever admit, not even to himself. The profound terror of not being enough for himself, of never managing to be the man he thought he could become. Imagine entering a man's mind in his most private moments, when all masks fall. There, in the silence of his room, in front of the mirror or in the darkness before sleep, emerges a voice that whispers the most terrifying questions. Is this all I've managed to become? Is this the man I wanted to be? Am I really worthy of my childhood dreams? According to Freud, this is the most devastating conflict of the masculine soul, the unbridgeable distance between the ideal ego, the image of the perfect man one wanted to become, and the real ego, what one has actually become. This distance isn't just disappointment. It's a narcissistic wound that bleeds every day, fed by every small failure, every compromise, every dream postponed or abandoned. This pain manifests through what Freud called melancholia of the ego, a deep and inarticulable sadness that cannot find words. The man doesn't know how to explain why he feels empty despite successes, why he feels nostalgia for a version of himself that perhaps never existed, why he feels he has betrayed a secret pact made with himself long ago. The most common defense mechanism against this pain is projection of failure. Instead of facing one's own inadequacy, the man projects it onto the external world. It becomes the system that doesn't work. It's others who don't understand. It's society that doesn't offer opportunities. It's easier to fight external enemies than face the most ruthless enemy, one's own self-criticism. This final sign reveals itself in life's transition moments, midlife crisis, retirement, moments of illness. It's then that the mask falls and the devastating question emerges. Who am I really without all the roles I play? It's the terror of discovering that behind the successful man, the present father, the reliable partner, there might be nobody. Freud understood that this is the most universal and most unconfessable secret of masculine experience. The feeling of being an imposter in one's own life, of acting a part without really knowing the script. It's the fear that someone, sooner or later, will discover that behind all that apparent confidence, there's a scared child who doesn't know what he's doing. The final paradox is that this terror of not being enough is precisely what prevents becoming truly oneself. It's the cruelest self-fulfilling prophecy. Fearing not being authentic, one ends up never being so. Have you ever sensed this silent pain in the men in your life? These 6 indicators all converge toward one single, painful truth. Behind every apparently strong and confident man often hides a child who fears not being loved for who he really is. It's a secret so deep that many men die without ever having recognized it, without ever finding the courage to remove the mask and show themselves vulnerable. Freud taught us that only by recognizing these unconscious mechanisms can we begin to free ourselves from them. Only by admitting our deepest fears can we transform them into strengths. Only by accepting our vulnerability can we become truly strong. What city are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let me know if any of these patterns resonated with you.